Hi everyone. Tonight, we're going to sit in a folding chair next to a squeaky cart in a kitchen that smells like steam and shrimp cocktail. You might think you're ready for this story, but unless you've ever smiled through betrayal in chiffon and heels, you might want to buckle up. So before you feel like you can just relax into the vibes, please take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really like what I do here. And while you're at it, tell me where in the world you're watching from and what time it is. I want to know who's listening on the other side of the door. Now turn off the lights, maybe turn on the fan for some soothing noise, and let's get started tonight. It was a wedding, my son Ryan's wedding, and I was sitting next to the kitchen. Not metaphorically, literally. A folding chair was wedged between a wheeled cart with a broken wheel and a pile of used trays, each stacked with the remains of someone else's celebration. I had a paper napkin tossed over the seat, like a pitiful gesture of hospitality, and the scent of marinara clung to the steam that hissed from the kitchen doors. I could hear the string quartet warming up inside, could even make out the beginning chords of Can't Help Falling in Love. And still no one came to get me. Not the planner, not the groomsman, not my son. I'd paid for the venue, the dress, the chair covers in dusty rows, which, by the way, is just a pretentious way of saying pink. I paid for the whiskey barrels Nora insisted on renting because they make it look rustic but chic. I covered the custom cocktail menu with his and her drinks. He chose old-fashioned. She picked something called a lavender fizz. I paid for the flower arch, the antique cake stand, the calligrapher in Vermont, the aisle runner made from vintage linen. I didn't bat an eye. I was so busy trying to give Ryan everything I never had that I didn't notice they'd erased me. I only realized it when the doors opened and I caught a glimpse of the head table. There was Nora's mother, seated beside the groom, laughing with her wine glass lifted high like she'd just personally birthed him in a beam of light. And there I was, watching it all from a metal chair, the kind you find in church basements and folding table bingo nights. The catering kid, who couldn't have been more than 22, stepped up sheepishly and said, "Ma'am, they said you were supposed to wait back here." Why, I asked, not even mad, just curious. He shifted his weight and stared at the swinging door like it might help him. "I think it's, for the aesthetic. The bride didn't want, like, visual inconsistencies with the photos. That's all. Visual inconsistencies. Like I was a smudge. Old age teaches you many things. One is that people will tell you the ugliest truths wrapped in polite phrases. For the photos means we don't want you in them. You're such a trooper means we know we're treating you badly, but please don't complain. And we appreciate everything usually means we hope you stay quiet. And I did. For the moment. I didn't flip a tray. I didn't storm the ballroom. I sat in that chair, steam, pressing against my back from the kitchen ovens, and smiled. At one point the music swelled and I could hear applause. They were doing the first dance, probably twirling under that chandelier I'd paid to have cleaned, because dust reads badly on camera. My hands were trembling just a little. A vibration in the wrist, like a wire pulled too tight. I pressed my palm flat against the pleats of my dress to hide it. I had worn mauve chiffon because it complemented Nora's colour scheme. I'd gotten my hair done at 7 a.m. that morning, sat in the chair while the stylist called me sweetheart and used way too much hairspray. I'd even brought a second pair of heels just in case. I had assumed I'd be sitting up front, smiling through tears, maybe giving a toast. Instead, I was the ghost in the kitchen. Someone dropped a plate of cold chicken in front of me. No explanation, just the food. The plate was chipped, the chicken rubbery. I didn't eat it. Instead, I looked down at my nails. Soft pink, freshly done. No one had noticed. The truth is, most people think being a mother is a permanent title. But sometimes you age out of the role without being told. One day, you're a necessity. The next, you're a liability to the colour scheme. Through the crack in the door, I saw them lift their glasses. Toasts. Laughter. The band shifted into something upbeat. Someone shouted speech, and I felt my chest tighten. Not because I wanted the spotlight, because I knew I was never meant to be in the story. Not this one. The music spilled through the swinging doors like it was mocking me. Laughter, too, bubbling up in waves, sharp, shrill, and just loud enough to reach my corner of exile. I blinked hard and stared at the fire extinguisher mounted on the wall in front of me. The paint was peeling in a spot just behind it. That patch of off-white drywall became my anchor. I didn't dare look toward the ballroom again. I wasn't strong enough, not yet. I'd been handed the program at the church. Cream cardstock gold, embossed and delicate as a whisper. I pulled it from my purse, unfolded it like it might hold a lifeline. Elegant cursive spelled out every detail. Her father walked her down the aisle, her mother gave the first speech, her cousin sang during the unity candle. Nowhere in that gold-trimmed fanfare was there a mention of me, Olivia Langston, mother of the groom, person who signed all the checks. It's not that I needed applause. It's just that I existed. I held the program like it might suddenly correct itself. Add my name. A last-minute miracle of ink. But no, I was the woman behind the shrimp cocktail. There's a theory often debated in social psychology that invisibility can be both a survival mechanism and a trauma response. You disappear before someone can reject you. But I hadn't chosen invisibility. It had been assigned to me. I sat still. I didn't move. My shoes, small beige wedges, stuck slightly to the floor beneath me. Some kind of sauce had dried into the tile. I shifted my weight, and the chair gave a groan that sounded like protest. I muttered sorry to no one. The worst part, I was still trying to behave. Still trying not to ruin it for him. Still telling myself, don't make a scene. Don't be that mom. Ryan had always been a sweet kid, the kind who gave me dandelions from the playground and made me birthday cards that said, "You're the best cooker in the world." I held on to those memories like old receipts, believing they still counted. The catering manager reappeared. Would you like more bread or a drink? We have soda back here." I nodded once. Diet Coke's fine. He brought it in a plastic cup, lukewarm and sweating. I said thank you anyway. That's the thing about women like me. We say thank you even when we're being dismissed. Even when we're sitting in a hallway full of clanging trays and cheap lights that buzz faintly above our heads. We say thank you because someone taught us once that being gracious is more important than being seen. The silver kitchen door swung open again. I didn't turn my head this time, but I caught a glimpse of Ryan, his profile backlit by chandeliers and flashbulbs. He looked tall, handsome, confident, and not once had he come to check on me. Her mother kissed his cheek like she'd raised him, like she'd ever held his forehead during a fever, like she was the one who sold her engagement ring to pay for his braces. She was wearing navy chiffon and pearls, a good choice for photographs. I took a shaky sip of Diet Coke. There's a word I've always loved, liminal. It means the space between, like the moment between breathing in and out, between night and day. Between what you thought would happen and what's actually happening. I was sitting in that space, not quite inside, not fully outside, just stuck in the threshold, forgotten. I reached for my purse, beige leather soft with age. Ryan bought it for me when he was 14, saved up birthday money and bought it from the department store downtown. I kept it because of the note he'd tucked inside to Mama, because you deserve something nice too. I hadn't been Mama in years. Now I was Olivia. Or worse, ma'am. The DJ's voice came through the door. All right, everyone. Time to raise a glass to the beautiful couple. I waited. Part of me still hoped. Maybe now. Maybe this is when he'll say something. A line, a word, a gesture. Thank you to my mom for making this day possible. But it didn't come. Instead, I heard Nora's father take the mic. We're so proud to welcome Ryan into our family. He's already like a second son to us. Second son. Not a word about me. Not even a nod. My eyes stung. Steam, I told myself. It's just the steam from the ovens. But it wasn't. It was the sharp sting of being erased in public and realizing no one there even saw it happening. Eventually, someone brought dessert, a slice of cake layered in white and gold. Nora's favorite vanilla with raspberry filling. I don't even like raspberry. I never have. And yet I paid for 5 tiers of it. I stared at the thin gold fork they handed me, lifted it, set it back down. And then I reached for my phone. One call to the florist, cancel the brunch flowers for tomorrow. One call to the band. The second set won't be needed. One call to the bar vendor. Please cancel the evening cocktail extension. We'll be closing early. No shouting, no drama. Just 3 quiet deletions. The sound of a door clicking closed, but this time by my hand. For the first time all day, I didn't feel like a problem to be hidden. I felt precise. That's the beauty of getting older. You learn when to speak. And more importantly, when silence is louder. I didn't sleep that night. Not even a little. I lay in the stiff hotel bed, with the scratchy duvet pulled up to my chin, staring at the ceiling fan spinning overhead like it might fly off and end me in a puff of irony. I still wore the mauve chiffon dress, still had the same tight curls sprayed into my hair, though now half of it was smushed from the pillow and the other half drooped in limp protest. The scent of the wedding clung to me, grease from the kitchen perfume from overpriced roses, faint champagne bubbles from someone else's glass that had splashed down the back of my arm. I could still feel the plastic of the catering chair against my thighs, even though hours had passed. At 3:14 a.m., my phone buzzed. I didn't check it. Didn't need to. I already knew what would be there. Calls from Ryan, maybe Nora, a few frantic messages from my niece Camille, who probably noticed something was off when the band packed up early and the brunch flowers never arrived. Instead, I picked up my tablet and opened the wedding budget spreadsheet. I'd been tracking every single expense for the past 14 months. Color-coded tabs, real-time updates, notes about Nora's elevated aesthetic and Ryan's sudden preference for vintage Edison bulbs strung from barn rafters. Every dollar accounted for, until it wasn't. 2 new transactions sat near the bottom, added just days before the ceremony. One for a bar tab at a rooftop tasting event. The other for an upgraded rehearsal dinner at the same restaurant where I'd been sat near the kitchen again. Both charged to my card. My name, my account. I opened the banking app. Double-checked. Same card. Then I opened Venmo, scrolled. A note from Nora to one of her bridesmaids. His mom is covering everything anyway. Might as well go big. Wedding vibes. Wedding vibes. Like it was an aesthetic, not a person. Not me. I didn't cry. Not then. I'd moved past tears. Past humiliation. I'd reached something colder, heavier. It's interesting from a psychological perspective how humans reach a threshold where the body stops reacting emotionally, not because we've healed, but because we've numbed. A protective response. The mind's way of saying, we're done flinching. I got up, walked to the mirror. My reflection startled me. Mascara smudged under my eyes. Lipstick faded. The skin around my mouth sagged in a new way. The corners drooped like they'd grown tired of holding a smile. For a moment, I didn't recognize myself. But instead of looking away, I leaned closer. I wiped off the makeup, washed my face, towel-dried my hair until it curled naturally again, looser, softer. I put on my glasses, sat down at the desk, and opened my email. The messages were brief. To the florist, hi. Please cancel Sunday's brunch delivery. As agreed, final payment will not be made. Thank you. To the band, due to a change in schedule, your services will not be needed for the second set. Please consider the matter concluded. To the bar vendor, we're scaling back on post-reception offerings. Cancel the second shift. Do not process the remaining balance. Each one was calm, professional, but final. At 5:37 a.m., the sky turned a shade of bruised lavender. The city outside began to wake. I sat on the edge of the bed, barefoot, watching the light creep across the floor. For the first time in months, I felt something familiar. Not warmth, Not joy, but steadiness. Like a wheel catching a groove again. I wasn't angry. Not yet. But I was done. Done being the afterthought. The purse string. The quiet placeholder. Let them figure out the brunch without the flowers. Let them sip mimosas while wondering why the custom jazz trio never showed. Let the bar shut down at 9:30 sharp. Let them feel what absence feels like, because I had been present for everything and still erased. There's an old saying my mother used to mutter when she got fed up. Let 'em lie in the bed they made, but don't you fluff the pillows. I finally understood what she meant. I drove home in silence. The kind of silence that makes your ears ring like your brain is trying to hum over the ache. The radio stayed off. My GPS glowed dimly, but I didn't need it. I'd done this route 100 times. The hotel to my house, a trip I could do on autopilot. And that morning I did. My hands stayed at 10 and 2. My foot never once tapped the gas impatiently. There was a slow calm to everything, like the moment after a car crash where your body hasn't caught up to what just happened. I watched early joggers, the school crossing guard, setting up cones, a bakery truck unloading behind the diner on 8th. Normal life. I floated past it like a ghost. When I pulled into my driveway, I didn't even pause to admire the rose bushes blooming like mad. I had planted them 2 summers ago when I thought gardening might give me purpose. They bloomed without me, without permission, loud and pink and fragrant. I walked into the house, set my purse down by the door, and headed straight to the bedroom. No shoes off, no coffee made. I went right to the dresser, the bottom drawer, the one that stuck halfway through and always needed a hip bump to open. I found it instantly, the red folder, the one Michael left behind when he died. My late husband. We'd been divorced for over a decade when he passed, but still there were papers of his I never threw out. Maybe because they were the last things of him Ryan ever touched. Maybe because I'm sentimental about closure. I'd found the envelope back then yellowed at the corners, tucked behind tax returns. I hadn't opened it. Not at the time. I couldn't. His death was still too raw, and the thought of hearing from him even in ink felt cruel. But now I needed it. I sat on the edge of my bed, slid my finger under the flap, and opened it. The letter was short, a page and a half. The handwriting slanted to the right, like he was always trying to outrun the truth. Olivia. I know you never wanted to hear from me again. I get it. I was a coward. But before I go, you deserve the truth. You need to know. Ryan isn't biologically yours. My breath caught. I found out years ago. That Emily was already pregnant when she left Ryan with me. She didn't want the baby. I told you he was ours. I let you believe he was conceived before we married, that it was a mistake I made. But the mistake wasn't Ryan. The mistake was the lie. I felt the room tilt. You raised him, Olivia. You loved him. You made a life for him. None of this was fair to you. But I knew if I told you then, you would have left. And he needed you more than anyone ever had. There were more words, apologies, explanations, regret. But I didn't absorb them. My eyes kept going back to one phrase. Ryan isn't biologically yours. He had never been mine, and yet he was. Because when Emily didn't want him, when Michael lied, when the world failed him, I stepped in. I raised him. I stayed. I carried him through fevers, spelling tests, nightmares, and scraped knees. I paid for his retainers and his trumpet lessons. I bought his first suit and taught him to iron a dress shirt before prom. I filled in every blank they left behind. And what did I get? A folding chair by the kitchen door. The woman who bore him couldn't do it. The man who lied about him didn't last. But I did. Old age teaches you the difference between pain and betrayal. One bruises the other, rewrites your history. I placed the letter beside me gently like it might crack. My whole body shook, not from rage, not anymore, but from clarity. Cold and clean, like steel. He had never truly been mine, and still I had made him my world. I looked around my bedroom. Beige walls, crooked photo frames, the candle on the dresser I only lit on birthdays. Everything I'd ever done in this house had been for him. And now I was the woman who got assigned a chair by the trash cart. It wasn't about the biology. It was about the disregard. He let them do that to me. He stood by. Not because he didn't know, but because on some level he didn't see me. I didn't cry. I thought I would. The old version of me, the one who kept tissues in every drawer, who cried during fabric softener commercials, who cried when Ryan got his wisdom teeth out, she would have. But I wasn't her anymore. I didn't even feel sad. I felt hollow, like someone had cleared me out with a soup ladle and left nothing behind but bones and steam. I sat there staring at the letter until my knees went numb and my fingers felt too stiff to bend. And then I moved, slowly, like I was testing each limb. I walked into the kitchen, still barefoot, and brewed a cup of coffee. Black. No sugar, no cream. Just bitterness, straight and honest. There's something sacred about drinking coffee alone in silence. It tastes different. Not better, just real. I sipped, staring out the window at the neighbour's sprinkler stuttering across their lawn. Tick, tick, tick. The grass glistened in the morning light, pretending everything was normal. It wasn't. Not anymore. I had lived for 62 years in service of a story I didn't write. Wife, mother, provider. Now I saw it for what it was, a play with parts I had auditioned for and earned, but never truly owned. I took my mug, sat at the kitchen table and pulled out my phone, not to scroll, not to doom spiral, just to see. The florist had replied, "We're disappointed by the short notice, but we understand. As per our policy, the final balance will be withheld." Fine. The band had too. We were already half set up when the cancellation came in. Extremely unusual. But your message was clear. We'll keep the deposit. Also fine. This wasn't about refunds. This was about control. A concept studied often in behavioral psychology, perceived autonomy. The idea that people need to believe they're making choices, even if those choices are limited. I hadn't had autonomy in years. But that day, I was the one making decisions. And it made me feel something I hadn't felt in a long time. Power. Not loud, not angry, just quiet, grounded certainty. At noon, the doorbell rang. I didn't answer. I stood in the hallway watching the blurry silhouette through the frosted glass. Then it faded. Whoever it was left without knocking again. A few minutes later, a chime from my phone. A message from Camille. "Hey, Aunt Liv. What happened? Everyone's freaking out. Are you okay?" I didn't respond. Not yet. Instead, I walked into the living room and sat on the couch. I looked around at the framed photos on the walls. Ryan in kindergarten. Ryan at the science fair. Ryan at prom. Ryan at college graduation. Ryan with his first car beaming like he built it from scratch. Each frame was a monument to a version of motherhood that had slowly erased me. I didn't resent the memories, but I didn't want to live inside them anymore. One by one, I took the frames down. Carefully, wrapped them in old towels, packed them into a cardboard box labeled "Memories, Not Obligations." I left the nails in the walls. Little reminders that something had been there, but chose to leave. Later that evening, I made dinner. Not for anyone else. Just for me. Lemon butter pasta. Roasted cherry tomatoes, fresh garlic. I lit a candle, played Norah Jones, ate at the kitchen table with one plate, one fork, one napkin. It was quiet, but not empty. That night I started a list, not a to-do list. An invitation list, just a yellow notepad and a pen that skipped if I held it too loosely. Names came slowly at first. Claire from the ER. She used to sneak donuts into my locker during night shifts. Mr. Henderson next door. He always brought my trash bins back in when it rained. Janet, the nurse, who stayed after her shift to help me finish paperwork on my birthday. Dana from the bookstore, who always asked about my week and meant it. People who saw me, not for what I could give, but for who I was. It wouldn't be a party, just a dinner. At my house, my food, my table. No folding chairs, no doors to swing shut in my face. I went to bed that night with a full stomach and an empty wall, and for the first time in a very long time, I slept soundly. The next morning, I woke up with sunlight on my pillow and no tightness in my chest. I brewed a pot of coffee and stood by the window, barefoot, watching the world go about its routine. The school bus wheezed by. Birds bickered on the fence post. A squirrel clung dramatically to the side of my rose trellis, like it was mid-action movie. I didn't check my phone, not yet. Instead, I pulled out the grocery list I'd made the night before. Basil, garlic, heirloom tomatoes, a loaf of sourdough from the good bakery, the one with the crust so loud it echoes when you slice it. I had a plan. Not revenge, not a stunt. Just a quiet dinner with people who remembered I existed. At the market, I took my time, smelled the peaches, sampled the cheese, picked lemons with skin smooth as secrets. No rush, no deadline, no one else's preferences to account for. I didn't even glance at the frozen food aisle. I wasn't making nuggets or boxed mac and cheese. This wasn't a compromise meal. This was mine. By the time I got home, my phone had 23 notifications. I turned it over on the counter. I had roasting to do. Music played softly through the kitchen. Van Morrison, Stevie Nicks, a little dusty Springfield. The scent of garlic and olive oil filled the air, clinging to the curtains like memory. I danced a little, while I chopped nothing too showy, just the sway of someone who finally has the kitchen to herself. There's something deeply therapeutic about feeding people on your own terms. You're not impressing anyone. You're not being graded. You're saying, "Here I am. This is what I made. I hope it's enough." By 5 o'clock, the house smelled like something from a food documentary. Not a single folding chair in sight. I set the table with mismatched plates, blue napkins folded into fans, and a mason jar of sunflowers right in the center. No candles, just soft lamplight and the golden glow of early evening. At 5:47, Claire was the first to arrive. She carried a bottle of red wine and hugged me like we hadn't seen each other in years, even though it had only been months. "Look at you," she said, stepping back to take me in. I had on a linen blouse the color of oatmeal and jeans that actually fit. My hair was soft at the temples, uncurled free. No Spanx, no jewelry that pinched. Just me. "I was starting to think you'd gone off the grid," she said, stepping inside. "I did," I smiled. Turns out the grid wasn't that great. By 6:30, everyone had arrived. 6 guests in total. People who had seen me cry, seen me exhausted, seen me human. They came with laughter, casserole dishes, stories about parking lots and broken elevators, and how their dogs hated thunderstorms. The kind of chatter that fills a room and makes it feel like home. We sat down and passed the food like communion roasted vegetables, lemon pasta, warm bread with good butter. No one pulled out phones. No one took a photo of their plate. We just ate. Somewhere between the roasted tomatoes and second helpings, the conversation shifted. Claire brought it there gently. "I saw your post," she said. A ripple of awareness passed through the table. "The check," Mr. Henderson asked. "That was yours." I nodded. "Yes." There was a beat of silence. "You don't have to talk about it," Janet said. "I know," I replied. "But I want to." And so I did. Not the whole thing. Not the letters or the biology or the late-night emails. Just the kitchen chair. The folding seat next to the broken cart. The silence. The cake I didn't touch. There were gasps. There were head shakes. Someone muttered unbelievable under their breath. But no one said, "Are you sure you're not overreacting?" No one asked me to give Ryan the benefit of the doubt. No one defended Nora. They just listened. There's an old proverb that says, "When the student is ready, the teacher appears." But I think it works both ways. When the story is ready, the audience shows up. And mine had arrived. Toward the end of the meal, as I collected plates and poured the last of the wine, Claire raised her glass. To Olivia, she said, her voice clear and light, for being the kind of woman who reminds us it's never too late to take your seat at the head of your own table. Everyone clinked glasses, even me, and for once I believed I belonged there. The knock came the next day, just after noon. Not frantic, not impatient, just steady. 3 soft taps, followed by silence. I stood in the hallway, barefoot, heart thudding low like a warning drum. Through the frosted glass, I could make out the silhouette, tall, broad, familiar. Ryan. I hadn't seen him since the wedding, since I was seated behind the shrimp cocktail and the broken cart. I opened the door slowly. He looked tired. His button-down was wrinkled sleeves pushed up like he hadn't finished dressing or hadn't planned on staying long. There were shadows under his eyes, and his mouth was pulled into a tight, unreadable line. "Hi, Mom." I didn't say it back. I just stepped aside and let him in. The living room was spotless. Sunlight warmed the floor where the rug had once been, the walls now bare of photos. Ryan's eyes flicked to the empty space above the fireplace. "Where are the pictures?" I ignored the question. "Sit down." He obeyed, dropping into the armchair like it was a court summons. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Finally, he sighed. "I didn't come to fight." "Good. He shook his head. "I don't understand what happened. One minute everything was fine, and the next, you cancelled everything. The brunch, the music, the bar. Then you posted that photo of the check. Do you have any idea how that looked?" I stared at him. "That's what you're worried about, how it looked." He blinked. "Well, yeah. People were asking questions." I stood and walked to the hallway closet, pulled out a cardboard box, and set it between us. The lid was already open. "What's this?" "Receipts." He tilted his head. "From the last 14 months, I said. Venue deposits, dress fittings, caterer payments, the whiskey barrels, the calligrapher from Vermont. Even the lavender fizz cocktail menu." He looked at the papers, but didn't touch them. "I paid for all of it, Ryan. I know, I held up a hand. "I'm not done." I reached into the box again and pulled out the letter. The one from Michael. His father. The one I never wanted him to read, but now felt essential. I handed it to him. He hesitated, then opened it. His eyes scanned the page. Once. Twice. His shoulders slowly caved inward, like someone had pulled a string from his spine. "You knew?" he asked, barely a whisper. "Now I do." He swallowed hard. "I didn't. Emily didn't know either. She still doesn't. I'm not angry that you're not mine biologically," I said. "I'm angry because when it mattered most, when you had the chance to stand up and say, 'This woman raised me,' you sat down." He looked away. "You let them put me by the kitchen. I didn't think it would matter," he muttered. "Emily said she thought it would be better for the pictures, the aesthetic, and you didn't think I'd care." I finished for him. He didn't argue. I cooked every meal, paid for every field trip. I sat in waiting rooms and stood in bleachers and stayed up all night when you had fevers. And you stood at that altar and made me invisible. I didn't mean, you meant to say nothing I said, and you succeeded." There was a silence, then deep, reverent final. He finally looked up. "I'm sorry. Too little. Too late." I closed the lid on the box and slid it across the table toward him. "These are yours now. Every receipt, every confirmation, every record of what you chose to forget." He didn't move. I stood, walked him to the door. He paused, hand on the knob. "You always said I was your whole world," he said quietly. "You were," I replied. "And now I'm finally mine." And I closed the door. No slam, just a quiet click. A woman reclaiming her peace. The house was still warm with the scent of garlic and lemon from the night before. I wandered through the rooms barefoot, the morning light, painting slow gold stripes across the floorboards. For a long time I just stood there, taking in the quiet. The walls were bare now, no pictures of Ryan grinning through gap-toothed school photos or hugging his high school diploma. I had taken them all down, not in a fit of anger, but in the slow, deliberate way you clear a shrine. reverently, silently, without asking permission. They were wrapped in towels and tucked into boxes marked "Memory Keep, Not Display." I opened one, lifted a frame. It was a photo from his 5th birthday. He was covered in frosting, holding up 5 fingers like it was the most important number in the world. I had made the cake myself, chocolate with strawberry jam, shaped like a fire truck. I had stayed up all night decorating it. I had forgotten how much of my identity I had tied up in that kind of effort, in being the magic behind the curtain. You know what no one tells you about motherhood? That you might spend your whole life trying to be unforgettable to someone who will someday forget you entirely. I placed the photo back in the box and taped it shut. Later that afternoon, I made myself lunch. Just a sandwich, tuna lettuce, extra mustard. And I noticed something small but profound. It was the first time in years I'd made a sandwich exactly how I liked it. Not cut in halves because Ryan hates triangles. Not on wheat, because that's what Daniel used to prefer. Just me mustard and a toasted bun. It's funny when you're young, you think being alone means you've failed at something. But when you're older, you realize solitude is a privilege, a luxury, a small rebellion against being stretched too thin. That evening, I lit a candle. Not a fancy one, just lavender. Soft, gentle, familiar. I poured a glass of wine and sat on the back porch. My garden hummed quietly alive with late summer bloom. The wind played gently in the wind chimes I'd bought years ago, but never really heard until now. And then I did something I hadn't done in a long time. I wrote a letter, not to Ryan, to myself. Dear Olivia, you made it. You survived the forgetting. You raised someone who doesn't remember, and you didn't let that erase you. You are still here, still whole, still worthy. I didn't sign it. I didn't fold it. I just let it sit there beside me like a friend. You see, we're so used to proving our worth with output dinners, cooked favors, done cards, sent bills paid, that we forget worth can exist without evidence. There's an old feminist phrase I used to love before life got too busy for slogans: I am not a vessel for someone else's becoming. That night, I finally understood it. I was not a vessel. Not anymore. The next morning, I brewed my coffee a little slower. I watched the pot fill, listened to the gentle drip, felt the steam warm my face. I didn't have anywhere to be. No one was waiting on me. There was no clipboard of errands or emotional logistics to carry. The house was quiet, but not like before. Not that kind of quiet that echoes with guilt or makes you flinch. This quiet was earned, soft, neutral, mine. I sat by the kitchen window, wrapped in my robe, a slice of sunlight falling across the table. I took a sip, sighed through it. It tasted better than it had in years, maybe because it wasn't for anyone else. Just me. The inbox was full again. My phone face down on the counter buzzed once, then again, then again. I picked it up, only to silence the notifications. From Ryan. I just don't understand why you're making this such a big deal. From Nora. Margaret, honestly, if this is about your seat, it's kind of childish. You know, we had a vision. We were under a lot of pressure. Everyone's judging us now. Ah, yes. The sacred vision. The ultimate defense of people who love the spotlight but hate accountability. Let's take a moment here, for the sake of logical analysis, to dissect the phrase, if this is about your seat. Conditional language, passive deflection, intentional vagueness. It's a masterclass in modern gaslighting. I didn't reply. There was nothing to say. Instead, I cleaned, methodically. I wiped the counters, folded a fresh dish towel, fed the cat. The act of reclaiming your space is holy. Every cleared surface said, I live here now. Me. Not your memory of me. Not your guilt. Just me. Around noon, there was a box at my front door. A bouquet. Carnations. Already wilting. No card. I didn't bring them inside. I carried them straight to the bin and dropped them in. The petals landed with a soft whump, like a sigh of relief. Even the flowers knew they didn't belong here. Later that evening, I checked Facebook again. The post I had made a photo of the check I wrote for the wedding signature in tacked numbers, blurred, had exploded. Over 100 comments. Some confused, some passive-aggressive, some kind. But one stood out. This broke my heart, Margaret. I've never related to something so deeply. Thank you for showing us we don't have to stay quiet. That one made me sit back, because that was it. That was the truth I hadn't been able to name until that moment. This wasn't about revenge. This was about refusing to stay quiet in the face of erasure. Sometimes power doesn't look like shouting. Sometimes it's just not answering, not explaining, not forgiving on someone else's timeline. That night, I ate dinner on the back porch again. A salad, fresh pears, walnuts, blue cheese, no beige chicken breast, no cocktail shrimp, just flavor I liked arranged how I liked it. And when the porch light flickered on, I didn't rush to fix it. I just let the dusk settle around me, content to be a silhouette in my own story. Not an extra, not the help, the lead. There's an old bit of wisdom from Buddhist philosophy. The root of suffering is attachment. And I had been attached to being needed, to being liked, to being seen. But now I was content to simply be. No more waiting for someone else to invite me in. No more standing behind the door, hoping for a glance. I had built an entire life around a boy who now saw me as a budget line item, and I was done being part of someone else's vision. There's something strange about reclaiming your space. It feels at first like trespassing in your own life. You tiptoe around familiar objects, suddenly aware of how many of them were chosen for someone else. The throw pillows in the living room, Ryan liked those. The vanilla-scented candles, Nora once said they were neutral and photogenic. Even the cereal in the pantry, honey bunches of oats. I didn't like it. Hadn't liked it in years. But it was always there for him. That afternoon, I took every box labeled Memory Keep and slid it into the guest room closet. Not the basement. Not the attic. I wasn't burying them. I just didn't need them in the living room anymore. Then I opened my linen closet, pulled out the blue tablecloth with the sunflower print I had bought on a whim 3 years ago, but never used, because it didn't match anyone's aesthetic. I laid it on the dining table. I lit a new candle, this one sandalwood and amber, heady and warm, and I set the table. 6 seats, 1 for me, 5 for the people I wanted around me. Not out of tradition, not out of obligation, out of choice. It wasn't a holiday. There wasn't a birthday. No milestone. Just a Wednesday evening in a house that now felt for the first time in years like mine. The guests started arriving just before 6. Claire again, with her signature red lipstick and a bottle of Prosecco. Mr. Henderson in his 2 short slacks and a tub of potato salad he bought but passed off as homemade. Janet in scrubs and sneakers, still smelling faintly of antiseptic and mint gum. Dana from the bookstore brought a stack of used books tied in twine. "For your quiet nights," she said, pressing them into my hands. And finally my neighbour Alana, who I'd only waved to in passing before. "I saw the Facebook post," she said. "I hope it's okay I came." "It's more than okay," I said. "It's real." We sat down, passed dishes, told stories. Nothing about weddings. Nothing about sons. Just life awkward first dates, terrible bosses, favourite weird snacks. Someone said, "I can't believe I've lived 2 blocks from you for 5 years, and we've never done this." I laughed. I guess I had a few things in the way. It's funny the people who show up when you stop performing. When you stop hosting in the hopes of praise. When you stop cooking meals to prove your worth. These people weren't here because they owed me anything. They were here because they wanted to be. Somewhere around the second helping of roasted squash and cornbread, the energy shifted. It wasn't loud, just settled. Claire raised her glass again. To Olivia, she said, voice soft but sure, for choosing herself. Everyone clinked glasses. Then Alana added, "And for showing us that it's never too late to stop giving to people who only know how to take." A chorus of agreement followed. I looked around the table, at the people who weren't my blood, but who saw me, not as a placeholder, not as a problem to be managed, but as a woman who made a damn good meal and set a table worth sitting at. I stood up, napkin still in my lap. My hands didn't shake. My voice didn't waver. I looked at every single person in that room and said, to the mothers who stayed quiet too long, to the women who gave everything and were told it still wasn't enough, to the ones who were asked to sit in the kitchen after building the damn house. This right here is for us. May we never sit down again unless it's at the head of our own table. Glasses lifted, forks paused mid-air. Someone whispered amen. And then we ate. Together, not because we had to, because we wanted to. The following morning I woke up before the sun, but not from worry. It was the kind of early wakefulness that comes from contentment. I wasn't anxious. I wasn't rehearsing arguments or thinking of better comebacks. I just woke up, alive and still. I slipped into my robe, brewed a fresh cup of coffee, and sat on the porch. The air was cool and full of birdsong, the kind of morning sound you only notice when your mind isn't busy trying to survive. Across the street, Mr. Henderson's garage door creaked open. He gave me a wave. I waved back. Just two people starting their day without pretense. For breakfast, I made scrambled eggs with scallions and toast. My toast. Burnt just slightly on one side, just how I like it. There was something beautiful about not making anyone else's version of a meal. No portioning, no cutting into perfect triangles, just me and my plate and the sound of butter sizzling. I cleaned the kitchen while humming a song I hadn't heard in years, one of those forgotten radio tunes from my 20s. Something about walking away stronger. Halfway through sweeping the floor, the doorbell rang. This time I opened it. Not Ryan, Diane. My cousin. She stood there with a grocery bag in one hand and an apologetic look on her face. Hi, she said. I brought muffins. I stepped aside to let her in. We sat in the kitchen, the same one where I'd once fed Ryan chicken nuggets and read Goodnight Moon 100 times. Diane opened the bag. Blueberry and banana nut, still warm. I wasn't sure if I should come, she said softly. I didn't say anything. I just wanted to say, I saw where you were sitting that night. I thought maybe it was a mistake. I didn't know they put you back there on purpose. I finally met her eyes. And when I realized I should have said something. I took a sip of coffee, let the silence stretch, then nodded. Thank you. She looked relieved. Like that moment, those two words had lifted a weight from her chest. It was wrong, she added. And you were right to do what you did. I didn't do it to be right, I said. I did it because I was done being wronged. We sat there for another 20 minutes, eating muffins and talking about nothing. The weather, her new job, her dog's weird allergy to parsley. It felt easy, unloaded. When she left, she hugged me tighter than usual. If you ever host again, she said, I'd like to be invited. And this time, I'll help set the table. After she was gone, I found myself smiling. Later that afternoon, I passed the hallway mirror, caught my reflection. I stopped. I looked older, yes. More lined than I remembered. But there was something else now. Something firm in the eyes. Something that said I've been through a fire. I'm not trying to come out untouched, just honest. I didn't turn away. I stood there and met my own gaze. And I whispered, You're allowed to take up space. Because that was the truth, wasn't it? We don't need permission to be seen. We don't need a place card to sit at the table. Some tables we build ourselves. That evening, the air was thick with that kind of golden quiet you only get in late summer. The sky was somewhere between honey and ash, and my wind chimes rattled like a soft warning, something changing, something settling. I roasted vegetables, carrots, zucchini, red onion. I added fresh thyme and sea salt, and watched them caramelize like they were telling me a secret. The house smelled like every memory I wished I had made for myself 20 years ago. I wasn't expecting anyone, but I still set a place. Not out of habit, not out of loneliness, just because it felt right. And then, just as I slid the sheet pan out of the oven, the knock came. Steady? Familiar? I froze. I knew that rhythm. I opened the door. Ryan. Again. Only this time, no tie, no stammer, no grocery bag of guilt. He stood there in jeans and a hoodie the way he used to when he came home from college with laundry and apologies. Hey, he said. I leaned on the doorframe. Back so soon. I wasn't going to come, he admitted. But Emily's been, well, let's say we've had a few arguments. And I started thinking about everything. I didn't invite him in. He didn't ask. I didn't get it. He continued, voice low. I thought it was about the money, or the chair, or the fact that you cancelled stuff. It wasn't just one thing I said. It was all of it. The years, the silence. The moment I realized you were building a future I was never supposed to be part of. He looked down at his shoes. I read the letter again, he said. The one from Dad. I waited. I don't know how to process it. I don't even know what it means for who I am. That's not for me to answer, I said. I already did my part. He finally looked up. And I never thanked you for that. Silence. I'm not going to ask you to forgive me, he added. But I wanted to tell you that I see it now. What I didn't see before. What I let happen. Did you come here to make things right? I asked evenly. He hesitated. I don't know. I came to say thank you. A pause. And to ask if we could talk. Sometime, maybe over coffee. There it was. The olive branch. Not dramatic, not wrapped in flowers or nostalgia. Just a suggestion. Coffee. I looked at him. My son. Not by blood, not even by conscious choice, but by the long, slow work of showing up. Again and again. I didn't say yes, but I didn't say no either. I'll think about it, I said. He nodded. That's fair. I closed the door gently. No slam, just final enough to give it weight. I walked back into the kitchen. The vegetables were still hot. The candle still flickered. I poured a glass of wine, plated the food, and sat at the table. Alone, present. And as I chewed the first bite, I realized something. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even sad. I was full, not just from dinner, from the clarity, the quiet, the freedom that comes from not needing anyone's permission to enjoy your own life. There's an old saying. You can't go back and change the beginning, but you can start where you are and change the ending. And maybe that knock at the door wasn't closure. Maybe it was something else, a new page. But whether or not I turned it, that choice was mine. The next few days passed gently like water over smooth stones. I woke when I went to bed without checking my phone. I cleaned the pantry, rearranged the living room, and threw out every expired spice jar I'd clung to for sentimental reasons. There's something sacred about sorting what stays and what goes. Every can of soup was a question. Every bag of tea a tiny reckoning. Do I want this, or have I just always made space for it? On Saturday, I took down the last of Ryan's childhood art from the hallway wall, the handprint turkey, the crayon self-portrait, with a toothy smile and arms like spaghetti. I wrapped them in tissue paper and tucked them into the same box I'd labeled Memory Keep. But now I added a second box. This one said Memory Release. Inside it, I placed the following. The tattered stuffed bear he'd stopped sleeping with at 10. His high school diploma, he had the framed copy. The list of colleges we'd argued over. The picture of me holding him in the NICU eyes, swollen shut. Because here's the thing about motherhood, they don't warn you that one day you'll need to unmother. Not out of cruelty, out of necessity. I walked through the rest of the house like I was meeting it for the first time. The dent in the doorframe where Ryan had once ridden his bike indoors, I no longer smiled at it. I didn't feel bitterness either, just detachment. It was history now, not grief. The armchair where I used to rock him back to sleep, I donated it. The bookshelf full of parenting books and how-to guides on raising well-adjusted boys, I packed those too. Let the library decide who needs them next. That evening, I made a meal I'd never made before, miso glazed eggplant with sesame noodles. A recipe I once tore from a magazine and tucked away with a whisper of someday. I poured wine, ate slowly. Set a second place at the table, not for Ryan, but for possibility, not a person. Just the idea that I was still open to new stories. When I washed the dishes, I didn't rush. I watched the bubbles gather and burst in the sink, thinking how small things, really small, ordinary things, had started to feel beautiful again. I wasn't lonely. I was finally learning how to be alone without needing to be needed. And that's what no one tells you about being a mother sometimes. To find yourself again, you have to be willing to no longer be the main character in someone else's story. Instead, you write your own, from scratch. No preset themes, no Pinterest board, no vision, just you. I hosted again the following week. Nothing formal, no invitations, just a few texts, casual and open. Dinner at mine, bring whatever, or nothing, just come hungry. By 6, the lights were low, and the house hummed with the good kind of noise. Claire brought garlic bread wrapped in a kitchen towel. Mr. Henderson brought his sister a retired music teacher named June, who brought a tray of lemon bars and stories that made us all cry, laughing. Janet arrived late, still in her scrubs, with takeout spring rolls and apologies we waved off. No place cards, no dress code, just people who showed up with hearts in their hands. We ate in the kitchen this time, my kitchen, not behind it. Someone sat on the counter. Someone else refilled wine without asking. There was flour on the floor, and a tea towel caught fire briefly on the stove, but no one cared. It was joy, real joy. Somewhere between dessert and the third retelling of June's story about accidentally joining a biker book club, she thought it was Baker Claire stood up again. "I think we should toast," she said. "Oh no," I laughed, waving a dish towel. "No more toasts. You're going to give me a complex." But she was already raising her glass, and the others followed. "To choosing yourself," she said, looking right at me. "To knowing when to stop giving to people who only know how to take." I didn't deflect. I didn't wave it away. I just stood up, took a breath, and raised my own glass. To the ones who stayed quiet too long. To the women who gave everything and were told it still wasn't enough. To those of us who built houses where we weren't allowed a seat at the table. This right here is our table now. And we will never sit behind the kitchen door again. The clink of glasses wasn't dainty. It was fierce. Someone shouted, "Hell yes!" and we laughed until our cheeks hurt. I looked around that room at mismatched chairs and old friends and crumbs on the floor and thought, this is what belonging feels like. Not perfection, not admiration, just presence. Later, after everyone left, I stood at the sink, washing dishes with my sleeves rolled up and my favorite playlist humming through the speakers. The kitchen was warm and full of leftover stories. And even though my feet ached and the wine glasses were streaked, I couldn't stop smiling. Because that night, I wasn't performing. I wasn't fundraising. I wasn't being tolerated. I was hosting. And for once, the room I was in matched the life I wanted. As I turned off the lights, I whispered something I hadn't said in years, not to anyone else, just to myself. "I'm proud of you." And I meant it. The final silence came like a blessing. No more messages, no more missed calls, just quiet. It was the kind that stretches like warm dough under your fingers, the kind that doesn't need filling. A silence I didn't dread anymore. Ryan never called again, and I didn't expect him to. The last thing he'd said at my door was thank you, and maybe in some other life that would have been enough to start again. But in this life, the life I'd finally started living for myself, it was closure, not an opening. I woke up the following Monday to birdsong and sun pooling across the foot of my bed. I didn't jump up to check my phone or wonder if someone needed something. I simply lay there for a while, listening to the world happen without me for once. It felt like relief. I made coffee strong and hot and sat on the front porch with a blanket across my knees. My robe fluttered in the breeze, and the garden, wild and bright with too many colors to name, danced gently in the wind. The roses had exploded into bloom again. Not in neat rows, not pruned to perfection, just blooming. I sipped my coffee, slowly watching as a bee hovered near the lavender bush I'd planted last year and almost forgotten about. I didn't need anything from that morning. It didn't need to prove itself special. It just was. Later that day, I went to the store, restocked the fridge, bought a book of crossword puzzles, and a new pair of socks, just because they were bright yellow and made me laugh. I wandered the aisles like a woman with time, a woman unburdened. In the parking lot, I caught my reflection in the car window. My hair was grey, my posture soft, but something about me had shifted. I looked rooted, solid. There was no trace of the woman who once waited behind a swinging door, with a napkin on her lap and betrayal in her chest. That woman had left the reception early, and she'd never gone back. When I returned home, I opened the door to my house, not with the weight of disappointment, but with the lightness of autonomy. I had set a new table, one made of mismatched plates and real laughter and uneven chairs. And it was enough. I was enough. Later that evening, I cooked dinner lemon risotto with roasted broccoli. Just me. Just because. I lit a candle, not for ambiance or company, but because it made me feel grounded. And when I sat down, it wasn't at the edge of anything. It was at the center of my life. I ate slowly, breathing between bites. I didn't think about Ryan. Not really. He was a memory now. One I'd folded gently and placed in a drawer I didn't need to open today. Because here's the truth. I came to understand the one that changed everything. You can give someone your whole world, your time, your money, your love. You can pour every ounce of yourself into their dreams, their birthdays, their dinners. But if they can't make room for you when it matters most, if they seat you by the kitchen door, you don't owe them another explanation. Or another chair. You owe yourself the head of your own table. That night, I sat under the porch lights with my second glass of wine and the sound of crickets in the distance. I pulled a blanket around my shoulders and whispered a simple prayer to the stars. Thank you for helping me remember who I am, and may I never forget again.